Super Saiyan 2 Gohan from the Buu Saga versus Super Perfect Cell. Who would win in this what-if fight and come out victorious between the two? Well, in this video, I'm going to break that down in depth, using the original manga that was created by Akira Toriyama and showing the evidence in terms of the power of these two fighters on display, how they performed in the past, and how they would theoretically perform against each other. So let's get into that right now. But before I begin, if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing so you could stay up to date with all my future videos. And if you like this content, please make sure to leave a like and a share, and also leave a comment down below and let us know exactly what you think of this subject. But let's get into the video right now. So the best evidence that we're going to be looking at in terms of the power of both Cell and Gohan comes from what we saw of them on display in the Cell games, and then of course the early Buu Saga. So let's start with the Cell games, where we're going to be taking a look at just how powerful Perfect Cell was before he even became Super Perfect, so you get an idea of just how strong he became after that Zenkai boost. He started off by fighting against Full Power Super Saiyan or Grade 4 Super Saiyan, the Mastered Super Saiyan, say that 3 times fast, all 3 of those back to back, of Goku. And the two of them, well, they started out right away where they were going and fighting one another and putting on a really spectacular display. However, nobody realized at first just how much both these fighters were holding back, and that this was just a little bit of a sparring match in order to warm each other up. Now, the main event really began, or at least what people thought was the main event at the time. That's when Goku went full power, and then Cell powered up in order to match him. Because the thing is that Cell, even though he was shocking everyone around him just like Goku did, wasn't really that close to his full power here. And yet, despite that, look at exactly what happened during this fight, in which we're able to see Cell on display in terms of not only using a variety of different techniques, especially in the anime version where he uses the multi-form, special beam cannon, destructo disc, or Frieza's variation of it, and so on. And he fires at first a Kamehameha that could have potentially just killed Goku right here and now, along with destroying the entire Earth. But Goku was able to teleport out of the way, and the two of them really got into their fight as it went on from here, where, as you could see, Cell took the advantage between the two of them, where, when he started to really ramp up his power and show Goku some of his real speed, he started to easily kind of dominate Goku here, getting the majority of the offense in here, but at this point, he wanted to put a stop to these kind of silly rules that he created because he didn't want the fight to end in out of bounds. So he destroyed the ring, and the two of them really got into their death match all right here. As you could see here, Cell was blasting at Goku, sending him flying away, until Goku flew up in the air and began to charge up his Kamehameha at full power. Which at first people thought, Goku's going to blow up the entire planet because of the fact that he has everything in his sights. I actually talked about recently a video you could see in the top right corner about how planet busting works in Dragon Ball, where I go in depth with that subject, including the scene and kind of the ramifications of what would have happened here. But nonetheless, Goku actually used his warp Kamehameha here, teleporting in front of Cell and firing a full power blast. As you could see right here, first, not only do we get the goofy faces that Toriyama always loves to show when a villain's about to get killed or at least really hurt, but Cell is left with most of the top half of his body destroyed, with his arms, his head, everything like that. However, despite this simply isn't enough to kill Cell, because he has one of the most broken forms of regeneration in the entire franchise, where he can jump up like a monster and just completely regenerate this whole section of his body and still keep going. This might have used up some of his energy for sure, as Goku says right here, but you spent a lot of your chi now. And also, with that being said, Cell still wasn't anywhere near his maximum power, so it wouldn't have really even mattered, because if he did go full power, he would have probably just one-shot Goku, considering just how much of a strength disparity there really was, which I'll go on to show soon. At this point, Goku, he had his back pushed against the wall, and he activated Vegeta's technique, which led to, Cell activating another ability that he inherited from Android 17, which is this force field. So I actually talked about this too in another video you could see in the top right about what effect the androids had on Cell, not just in terms of techniques like you could see here, but additionally in terms of the psychological effect that they had on him. But it was clear at this point that Goku couldn't win. He admitted this as well, because what do we see right here? He actually quits. He gives up on the fight because he knows just how powerful Cell is, but also because all of this ties directly into his strategy, which is that he purposely fought Cell so that he would be able to not only push himself and see just how well he did against the villain, but more importantly, so that he would be able to show Gohan how Cell fights for the time of their fight. And speaking of what ended up happening next in their fight, we end up leading into that right now, in which we see that at this point, Goku gives a statement about just how powerful Gohan was as a Super Saiyan here. Of course, this is Gohan when he was stronger, potentially, I'll get into that soon, than Gohan from the Buu Saga. Maybe, maybe not. And he gets into right here saying, Piccolo, Gohan has more power than I can believe. Think about it. He's been fighting with us ever since he was little, and that his power began to awaken within the Room of Spirit and Time. And this is where the point where he actually finds out or reveals to everyone that Gohan was already stronger than Goku as a Super Saiyan right here than the Goku we just saw fighting Cell. Because he thought the whole time that he was weaker than Goku and that Goku wasn't fighting for real. Goku, of course, says, I don't know about Cell, but I was doing my best. So to you, it looked like I wasn't really trying, huh? Which means that Gohan was significantly above Goku, at least to the point where he just assumed that Goku wasn't even going all out because of the fact that he thought Goku was stronger because he was comparing him to his own internal power, to the shock of everyone around him, especially Vegeta. Cell doesn't necessarily buy all this at first, but then when Gohan shows up and he powers up, what do we see right here? Well, after Goku gives Cell a senzu bean to let him go back to full power, which I discussed isn't actually a bad thing. In this video you could see in the top right, yet another cheap plug. But at this point, Gohan powers up to his own full power and shocks everyone around him. Just look at Cell's face, for example. This is Cell that just saw Gohan fighting, or Goku fighting, firsthand, and yet he's shocked at the power of Gohan. Everyone is. Vegeta, Torankasu, Kuriti, Yamcha, Piccolo, 16, except for Goku. And look at everyone in their thoughts here. How did Gohan get so powerful? Vegeta can't believe his eyes. That's mild-mannered Gohan. And then Cell even basically backs this up. Perhaps what Son Goku said wasn't just a bluff after all. But it's still a joke to think that he can defeat me. Yeah, you're gonna think differently soon. I'll kill him before he can land a blow. Weep, Son Goku, weep when your son dies because of your arrogance. What an awesome villain. I also talked about that in another video in the top right where he's the best villain in Dragon Ball. And when the fight actually happened, Gohan actually didn't do too bad here, where Cell actually decided to put more effort into fighting him than he did against Goku in terms of increasing his speed and power, which he says during the course of the fight. And he's trying to actually elicit an amount of anger within Gohan so that he can tap into his true power, which we go on to see later on. Now, Gohan doesn't spend much of the fight actually fighting back because he doesn't really want to hurt Cell or kill him because that's how his character is compared to Goku. However, he still is able to get a little bit angry and kick Cell down and deal a little bit of damage, where you could see that he has a bloodied lip, the exact same side of his lip as Gohan. Again, more of those time echoes that Toriyama loves to get into. You guys could check that out on my video. I don't know how many cards I'm going to be able to use in this one. So nonetheless, what ended up happening, Gohan was dodging all these attacks just as a Super Saiyan. However, he would go on to get even more powerful, because even though Cell was wrecking Gohan at this point, what would end up happening? Well, Gohan would eventually become a Super Saiyan 2 after Android 16's head was crushed. At this point, Gohan totally flipped the script and flipped everything around in terms of the power dynamic, where in this awesome form, what did he do? He went on to obliterate the Cell Juniors in very graphic fashion, as you could see here, in a way that none of the other Z fighters who were going full power at the time, except for the weakened Goku, were capable of defeating even one of these guys overall. And yet Gohan effortlessly annihilated each of them, just with swift kicks, punches, and everything like that. And what ends up happening at this point, Cell goes to power up to his full power in his perfect form. And at this point, he's shocking everyone. It's clear just how much vastly above his prior state he really was. And everyone was already sensing Gohan. So to be surprised here shows that, Cell definitely wasn't, anywhere, close to his full power before, at least that we could see. Even Goku is, taken aback by this, and he had just fought the guy. But Gohan isn't, because his power still is vastly above Cell's, which he proves when Cell can't even hurt him with a punch, and then Gohan goes on to just utterly annihilate him during their fight, wrecking him mercilessly, and eventually pushing him to the point where he self-destructs and comes back even more powerful. Again, kind of changing things up, where he returns as Super Perfect Cell, killing Trunks, and then in turn explaining in depth why this happened, where he explains that there's a small cluster of cells in his head that makes up his core. If that cluster isn't destroyed, my body can go on regenerating, even if only microscopic pieces remain. When I self-destructed, my core was unharmed. And then he comes back in really gross fashion. I hadn't really counted on regenerating. I was lucky. Even better, now I'm complete without 18, and I've powered up like Son Gohan. It must have been my Saiyan cells, a boost in power after a brush with death. I've learned to teleport like Son Goku, so I've come back even more perfect than ever. Son Goku didn't defeat me after all. He just made me better. So it's clear that Cell got a big power up here in terms of everything with that Zenkai and the ability to teleport, which adds to his even more exhaustive reservoir of different abilities that he has that he inherited from all the other Z fighters. Regeneration, the ability to potentially use all of Goku's techniques like the Kaioken, possibly the Spirit Bomb, Kamehameha, Piccolo's regeneration, Frieza's ability to survive in space and other environments, and, the list really goes on in terms of the abilities that not only that he inherited, but also perfected as he evolved into his complete or perfect form. However, despite all this, Gohan goes and powers up one more time when Cell appears, going to his full power, and Gohan actually starts to laugh. Cell is surprised here. He's like, what's so funny? Have you gone insane? And Gohan actually is confident that despite this power-up, he could still defeat Cell. He says that his dad died because he was arrogant. I'm glad I can avenge his death. I just wish I'd killed you earlier. And Cell says that things won't work out as well for him this time. So the question is, that we get a lot during this point in the fight is, did Gohan ever really go all out against Cell, like at any point during this fight and maybe even afterward? Because the fact that, I got the impression at least that because Gohan wasn't really trying when he was beating down Cell, that he must not have really been punching him as hard as he could, kicking him as hard as he could, blasting him as powerfully as he could. He was just kind of skimming off the top. So this means that Gohan could have been even more times more powerful than Cell at this point than what he was already putting out. Which means that when Cell returned with the Zenkai here, he powered up to the level of Gohan that he had already been feeling and sensing at the time, as I explained in the top right corner, where I discussed how Zenkai boosts work in Dragon Ball Z. I think I just ran out of cards, guys, so you'll have to check out my channel for the other videos I reference at this point. I'm going to do it. Which means that Gohan realistically would have still been a good amount more powerful than even Super Perfect Cell here, which might be proven as we'll go on into this fight. However, at this point, things kind of get, derailed as Vegeta interferes in the fight, goes on to attack Cell in his rage after his son was killed in front of his eyes. Cell even has to brace a little bit here, which also might show just the level of power that not only Vegeta's exerting, but also level of power that Cell has at this point, because he's not exactly tanking this, like Broly when he got blasted with the Kamehameha 2 millimeters away from his face, But at this point, what ended up happening was that Vegeta got effortlessly slapped away like a pimp named Slickback, knocking him right down to the ground, and Gohan flew in to stop this piercing attack that was meant to defeat Vegeta. Now, this is Gohan as a Super Saiyan 2. He flies in the way, not really able to deflect this attack, and what ends up happening, well, he is injured as a result to where his arm is broken here, where it's bloodied, where it's dripping, and it's also, broken. So the question is here, in terms of this, especially with what we see with Gohan say right here and Cell says, enough fooling around. I've let this go on too long. And then Gohan says, Cell's powers increased more than I thought. So a lot of people have interpreted this scene as actually saying that Cell was more powerful than Gohan as a Super Saiyan 2. That enough fooling around means that he wasn't really trying when he went to kill Vegeta, whereas when that means that if Gohan went in here and tried to, save Vegeta and didn't make it in time, even though he was a Super Saiyan 2 flying perhaps at top speed, then this would theoretically mean that Gohan was not, as powerful as Cell, and that Cell could have been significantly above him. I don't really tend to go with that kind of viewpoint. I think it's just that Cell blasted before Gohan even ran away, Cell was closer, and that Gohan wasn't trying to protect himself at all. So even though he is more powerful potentially than Cell here, most likely, this still means that he would have been able to be injured in this case. Additionally, when Cell goes to power up his Kamehameha, which he states would be able to destroy the entire solar system, what ends up happening is that Gohan hears from Goku, who tells him to fire up a Kamehameha just like Cell, and he believes he can win. Goku knows Gohan's full potential even more than Gohan does, and additionally, he also is sensing everything happening at the time, which is why he even knows that this Kamehameha clash is happening, because he's using King Kai and his top-tier sensing abilities to do that. Now, Gohan says right here, but what good would it do now? I can only use one arm and I've lost half my chi, or ki as they pronounce it in Japanese. Goku still says, you can do it, believe in yourself, one last time, show me the power we made together. So again, is this actually accurate here? Did Gohan really lose half of his power when he was hit with that blast and his arm was crippled? Or is this something that's more of a mental block inside of Gohan, that because the fact that he was demotivated, as we could see right here, not even wanting to put up a fight against Cell, this in turn means that he didn't actually lose half his power, but really was only feeling like he was that level of power because the fact that he was demotivated. And of course, chi or ki also has the mental aspect, which you kind of need to have in place in order to be able to really go full power and do everything like that. I always kind of interpreted it as the latter, where Gohan, probably didn't really lose half his power, but when he starts out the fight, he's only outputting half his power up until the very end when he really unleashes everything. So even with potentially half his power right now, Gohan's able to fire up a Kamehameha, which matches up to what Cell outputs. Now, Piccolo says right here, it's no good, we can't win, Gohan's chi is too weak. He never said this before Cell attacked him. So there's a chance that Piccolo was sensing a stronger ki from Gohan during this point in the fight. Additionally, not just that, but Cell had way longer to charge up his Kamehameha. He was doing it for a while before Gohan even fired his up. So as a result, this kind of also might lend the idea that Gohan was more powerful or able to gather up chi much faster than Cell because, he was able to then match up here. Either that or an alternate theory somebody might propose is that despite the fact that Gohan is firing at Cell here and Cell wants to win, he's doing this for fun. He's only blasting at Gohan to match him right now before everything goes on. In the anime, we see Cell kind of rev it up a number of times. In the manga, Cell is just saying that he thinks he's going to win, that he's going to overpower Gohan, and Gohan says right here that he's doing his best and he can't do anymore, but Goku corrects him saying that you're holding back trying not to destroy the planet and just let go, use your full power and the Dragon Balls can fix it. Which, they have the Namekian Dragon Balls to save everyone just in case, because chances are if he really just went all out not caring about the planet, the Earth Dragon Balls along with Dende wouldn't exactly be there much longer anyway. Now, we don't really know for a fact what would have happened if Cell was going just 100% trying, assuming that he was holding back here and, he fired at full power with zero disregard for the Earth, or 100% disregard for the Earth, actually, just like Gohan was theoretically going to do, because we see that Vegeta interferes, knocking Cell a little bit off guard and also kind of distracting him. And then at this point, this is the time where Gohan really fires his full power attack. Now, if Cell was going full power, then this means that Gohan's definitely way more powerful than Cell here, because his attack instantly overpowered Cell's Kamehameha, fired, and then completely obliterated him down to nothingness. Which means that Gohan clearly was more powerful, assuming that Cell was. Like, maybe you could argue that Cell could have fired a blast equally as powerful if he had actually seen everything coming, because as you could see right here, he wasn't expecting any of this to happen, and that opening is really what allowed Gohan to win in this example. But again, this is also potentially a weakened Gohan by half, and someone who we know is weakened at least to some degree because he was injured. So in terms of that, I would say that Gohan definitely was more powerful out of the two here. Now, with that being said, in terms of like a straight up fight between the two of them, there is the question of could Cell have been able to use some of his techniques to overpower Gohan if he didn't just, if Gohan didn't get injured and the two of them basically just started with a Kamehameha clash. If Cell like decided to just fight Gohan normally with his broken arm, could he have beaten him? Additionally, if he had fought him one-on-one normally, would he been able to use his different broken techniques and, the instant transmission to get the edge? I don't know if that's the case because Gohan might have been that much above him to where it would nullify that, but that's definitely something to keep in mind. Now, this leads into Gohan in the Buu Saga. So I discussed in a video in the past where I discussed that Gohan the Buu Saga might not really have lost anywhere near as much power as people think. A lot of people seem to believe that Gohan at this point actually lost several times the power or something. However, as I discussed with MJXTV in my video you could see on my channel, how much power did Gohan lose between the Cell Saga and the Buu Saga, it might have been maybe 20-25% of that, because you could also make an argument that he didn't truly lose power, more that he kind of lost the ability to tap into his deep reservoirs that he gets later on with Ultimate, and also that he lost his fighting sense. Now, with that being in mind, another thing to keep in mind here is that when Gohan is going Super Saiyan 2, and even Super Saiyan, he is more powerful than Gohan was when he started the fight against Cell before he became a Super Saiyan 2. Now, the reason for that is because the fact that when Gohan was fighting Cell as a regular Super Saiyan, this is before he tapped into his hidden potential and was able to do it at will. Something that you could argue he just completely lost over time. However, there's an argument to also be made that Gohan still had about 80% of that hidden potential that he had at the time that he fought Cell, and the Super Saiyan 2 just brings him up to about that point. However, with that being said, this would still be more powerful as a Super Saiyan theoretically, and also as a Super Saiyan 2 than Gohan, would have been as a Super Saiyan when he was fighting against Cell initially during this point in the fight, even though, of course, Vegeta does go on to say right here when Gohan powers up to Super Saiyan 2, he was better back when he beat Cell. He slacked off in his training regimen. Peace isn't good for a warrior. So that's our first statement that Gohan is weaker here. As we go on to see, he is restrained by the Supreme Kai right here. And the reason why I'm showing this is because it plays into right here later on. Because later on, of course, Gohan would go on to fight Dabura. And we are given estimates of his power comparative to Cell during the section right before this, where we see that Supreme Kai is freaking out, saying that, they don't want to awaken Buu because even if he's not at full power, he'll still be able to kill them. Vegeta doubts his power because he says he doesn't think he's much to speak of, just like Dabura. And then he says that he's not as terrible as Supreme Kai thinks. We saw him outside and we could easily have handled him as long as we dodge his saliva. And then Supreme Kai asks Goku if this is true. Goku says yes, at the level we are now anyway. There was a guy named Cell 7 years ago. I guess they're about the same. So then we see Supreme Kai going back to what I was just showing you before. Are Super Saiyans really that strong? Come to think of it, it was hard to paralyze Son Gohan when he was a Super Saiyan, and he wasn't even at full power. So when Gohan was a Super Saiyan 2 before, as we could see right here, he actually wasn't at full power. He just powered up to like the basic, lowest level of the Super Saiyan 2 that he could do, I guess, at this point, just to kind of go into it, to show off it to Kibito, because because Kibito only wanted him to be a Super Saiyan. And he's like, do you want me to show you my new Super Saiyan form too? So when Supreme Kai restrained him, he wasn't going full power, which means that Gohan only went full power later on when we see him go to fight against Dabura. Now again, in terms of the estimate, as we could see here, he is said by Vegeta to now be weaker than both Vegeta and Goku. This is Vegeta before he becomes Majin, is able to match up to Goku's level of power, and we know that Goku as a Super Saiyan 2 is at least more powerful than Gohan as a Super Saiyan 2 here, and likely more powerful than him as Super Saiyan 2 in the tournament. Translations vary on that, but overall it tends to lean in the being stronger than Super Saiyan 2 Gohan when he fought Cell. Nonetheless, what we see here is that, of course, we never know what may happen when he gets mad, which leads back to, you know, something I'll get into later when it comes to the actual fight between him and Cell at this point, who would be able to win if Gohan's rage would maybe help him in terms of all of that. This leads into the fight against Dabura. And, of course, as we see, Gohan is fighting here as a Super Saiyan 2. And yes, he is a Super Saiyan 2, even though we don't see the lightning because of what I discussed in another video on my channel. Really, several videos at this point, but there's one specifically about that and about Dabura's fight against Gohan. And the two of them are kind of relatively evenly matched. Dabura is showing off what would happen if Gohan at this point were to fight someone Cell's level or even potentially stronger with very different techniques. He uses his flame breath, he uses the after image, he uses a magical blast right here, he even uses the spit against Gohan, which he eventually is able to get out of. And as we see right here, Goku says, so he uses magic, huh? He's tougher than I thought. So Goku said earlier, like I showed before, that Dabura is around the same strength as Cell. And as I just showed before, Goku was sensing the power of Super Perfect Cell. And typically when they're referring to somebody, like they're referring to Frieza, like earlier when Supreme Kai said that he could kill Frieza with a single blast, or they're referring to Cell, they're usually meaning the most powerful form of that character at the time, not like a lesser form like imperfect or semi-perfect or even just regular perfect. They're referring to Cell as his most powerful. So again, they're talking about Super Perfect Cell, and Goku actually revises his statement here in terms of Dabura's power and says that he might be even more powerful, or at least stronger, depending upon the translation, or tougher than he initially expected, which means that Dabura here might be above Super Perfect Cell, and yet Gohan is basically stalemating him. Vegeta right here also says he still shouldn't have this much trouble with him. Pathetic. Gohan was stronger when he was a kid. He really has been slacking. I'm losing patience. And this is where Vegeta starts to kind of let himself purposely be seen to be evil by Dabura so that Babidi will take over his body. Now, despite Dabura being kind of caught off guard here, Gohan charges in, and Dabura is still able to kind of take advantage of this by shooting spit right at him, which if Gohan, you know, got hit in the face or somewhere just on his skin, probably would have led to him turning into stone right now, which is why Dabura is so kind of OP here. He's basically an even more powerful version of Devilman, right? Just with Cell's level of power above that even. And he's able to throw this off. Dabura goes to use his sword and attack Gohan, but Gohan again is showing off his strength here by blocking Dabura's sword barehanded and snapping it in half. And the two of them are huffing and puffing at this point. So again, it seems like they're basically equivalent in terms of their power. This is when the fight stops, but it does go to attempt to pick up again later on when after Vegeta's become Majin and Goku's going to fight him, Goku goes to say this to Gohan when he and Supreme Kai are going to fight Babidi and Shin, or Babidi and Dabura. I guess that Supreme Kai isn't going to fight himself. But even despite that, what ends up happening? Well, they end up saying right here, get angry, Gohan. Remember the time you fought Cell and bring out all the power you have. You can't lose to anyone that way. Anyone. Right when Gohan and Supreme Kai go to fight against Dabura and Babidi, Gohan remembers what this statement is, which is that he needs to get angry, and that way he won't lose lose to anyone. He says this right here, that he is angry, but still he can't be the way that he was back then, which isn't really a reference to going Super Saiyan 2 or anything like that. Again, Gohan's aura and everything aside from the lightning still is showing he's a Super Saiyan 2 here. He has all the spiky aura, he has the spiky hair with the one bang, which he's always depicted as after the tournament anyway. So he definitely is a Super Saiyan 2 here. And even right here, Dabura seems to think that he can win right here, saying that of course he can because he fought him earlier and it won't be that hard for him to win. However, after this we see that Buu starts to be woken up, and what ends up happening here, Gohan gets really mad and freaks out because he wants to stop this from happening. He says if he's already at full power anyway, I might as well do something. You know, we see him raging and going up to his 100% maximum that he could put out, and he fires a Kamehameha right at Buu's shell. And as we see what happens, he's also firing it with Dabura and Babidi in his path. And what happens, Dabura doesn't even attempt to block this. Instead, he jumps out of the way as quickly as he possibly can with Babidi in his hands. Now, you can make an argument that maybe he's trying to just save Babidi and he didn't want him to be casual damage or, collateral damage, but nonetheless, Dabura doesn't even really attempt to go in there and stop him or anything like that, because maybe much like when I showed in a fight between Piccolo and 17 who would win in another fight that you guys can check out on my channel, it's possible that he jumped out of the way because he knew that he wouldn't be able to tank or stop this level of attack, which again means that Gohan was putting out even more power than before and was showing off that he actually was stronger than Dabura, who himself was stronger than Super Perfect Cell potentially, or at the very least at that level of power. Hey, here he is making a cameo in my statement. And this is even more backed up in terms of Gohan putting out more power than he did at the tournament in all these scenes, where he says to Kibito that his power surpasses all imagination and may even surpass Buu's. And then what does Kibito say? But how could that be? And Shin replies, you haven't seen what those three Saiyans can do. Again, Gohan went Super Saiyan 2 in front of Kibito, and yet Supreme Kai is saying that Gohan's power here is way more powerful than anything that Kibito showed, which means that Gohan definitely was a Super Saiyan 2 here, and also when he fought against Dabura, otherwise that statement wouldn't make any sense whatsoever. So with that being said, when it comes down to everything in terms of Gohan's power and his ability to fight, as well as Super Perfect Cell's power that I showed before, who would actually win? Well, let's get into that conclusion right now. So if Gohan as a Super Saiyan 2 in the Buu Saga were to fight against Super Perfect Cell, who would win? Well, as I mentioned earlier in the video when I was going over Cell's power and feats, he definitely has a lot of techniques that he has in his reservoir of different abilities. Not just his natural abilities or bioorganic abilities with his ability to regenerate, he could blow himself up, and also at the same time, get a Zenkai boost from it, assuming he would survive every single time, even though he said he was surprised and it was an accident that he survived. And also he has all these different techniques of the other Z fighters, including the instant transmission. So that's definitely something that, along with his level of power that we saw on display against Super Saiyan 2, adolescent, teen, Cell games, Gohan, whatever you want to call him, or, whatever the video games call him in each different video game. The fact of the matter is that Gohan was, based on all the evidence, still more powerful than Super Perfect Cell during the Cell games. And when he goes to fight against Dabura, who is equivalent to Super Perfect Cell or probably even stronger based upon certain translations, this means that Gohan was stalemating him as we saw before, but then put out even more power than he was during his fight against Dabura when he attacked Buu's shell, which Dabura couldn't even deflect or fire a blast to stop, do a key clash. He just jumped the heck out of the way. We never saw that their fight came to a resolution, but much like Cell, Dabura also has a number of really powerful techniques, like the magical ones I showed you, and also the spit that can one-shot anyone, probably even Cell, especially if he hits him in the face, and that corrupts his core or whatever. I mean, Cell should have died to Goku, but we all know that that was a plot hole, which I also talked about in another video that's either in the cards or on my channel. Nonetheless, I think that when it comes down to it, if we really examine who would win, I think that based upon his power, based upon his ability to tap into his rage over time, and based upon what we saw with his fight against Dabura, that Gohan probably still would be able to defeat Super Perfect Cell at this point in the series. The fact of the matter is that he can range between 2 to, 1.5 times stronger than Super Perfect Cell based upon what you look at the feats and everything like that. Maybe a little bit less, but nonetheless, I still think it would be within that margin of error we saw in the Buu Saga with Gohan losing power. And additionally, on top of that, I think that, Gohan, he's shown that when he's backed into corners like this, and we've also seen with Cell's arrogance, maybe he'd want to try and bring out Gohan's power once again. If, let's assume that Cell at this point actually remembered everything that happened. He came back for a one-day visit somehow. Maybe Babo is like, I'll have him fight in my tournament. And then he goes immediately to fight Gohan at this point before he fights Buu or even afterward or something like that. Then the fact of the matter is that I think Gohan would come out victorious. And if we do say that this is Gohan after he fights against Buu, maybe he got a Zenkai, assuming that that was really still a thing at this point in the story, and he definitely would be able to win after his training with the Z-Sword, which I also discussed how powerful he became with that Z-Sword training on my channel as well. So I think that Gohan, obviously goes to say, or without saying, that he would stomp Cell like the bug he is as ultimate and everything moving forward in the Buu Saga after that point too. So I think that with all the evidence there being said, Gohan would prove victorious out of the two here. And that's not just because I'm a Gohan fanboy. Don't worry, I'm a Cell fanboy too. Favorite hero and favorite villain in one video. It's like Christmas, only with more explosions. But alright guys, let me know your own thoughts down below in the comments. Who do you think would win? Super Saiyan 2 Gohan from the Buu Saga or Super Perfect Cell? Also, if you like this video, please make sure to leave a like, share out this video so other people can see it. And additionally, if you're new here, consider subscribing so you can stay up to date with all my future videos. With that being said, make sure to stick around because there's a lot more to come in the future.
And you better subscribe!